Somebody once said there's strength in numbers. Certainly the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Pac-12 believe that, and they believe that they can join forces and combat the mighty SEC. Welcome to the Voice of College Football here on a Friday night. It's 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Hope that you're all doing well and ready to talk some college football with me and with each other, of course, in the live chat. So I always enjoy. It does my heart good to see all of you taking part in the live chat and talking it up yourselves concerning college football. Let's see. We are 1 week and 1 day away from college football at UCLA and Hawaii, Nebraska, and Illinois. And then 2 weeks from right now, we'll be in the midst of a colossal weekend that launches on Thursday night, runs through Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Count them. Is that 4? Is that 4? Is that 5? That's 5 consecutive days of college football. 5 consecutive days of college football. That's the only time we get it until bowl season. Thursday with a nice slate of games, some decent games on Friday, including North Carolina and Virginia Tech, and also Michigan State, Northwestern. And then, of course, Saturday, Clemson, Georgia, Alabama, Miami, LSU, UCLA, tremendous day. Iowa and Indiana, Penn State and Wisconsin on that Saturday. Then Monday night, of course, Sunday night, Notre Dame, Florida State, Monday night, Louisville and Ole Miss. Okay, before we get there, we've got to deal with this alliance that is being formed by the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Pac-12. What do we know? We know a lot of vague terms that are being thrown out concerning philosophy, structure, alignment, scheduling. That's about the most concrete term that we can latch onto and possibly speculate on what that means. I've got my thoughts, would like to hear from you as well. That was the title of the show. Prior to that had been that I was going to preview anybody's team that you wanted to bring forward. So this is the night to preview your teams. I am sending out my predictions, of course, by the day. I've got a lot of catching up to do. And we may just tackle this in marathon fashion. I waited too long to release my predictions, and all this expansion and realignment talk derailed us for several days while we attacked that. My predictions are coming, and many have been released. About 20 or 25 teams already released, and I got to say, with some of the numbers, I understand when I release a Kansas prediction video, Northwestern prediction video, I understand nobody's going to watch those, so maybe I should just bypass those, let those go. All right, the phone lines are open right now at 860-499-3332. So much to talk about concerning college football, and by extension, so much to talk about concerning the voice of college football. We have coming your way post-game shows. For those of you who have joined us in past seasons, you know what my deal is on Saturday afternoon. I watch as many games as I possibly can. And in between those typical game time windows, which are noon, 3:30, prime time, late night, Eastern time, I jump on here and take your calls and respond to your feedback, your comments, your questions, and we do some post-game shows, and which basically mean post-game / pre-game shows leading into the next broadcast window. This season, though, if you are a fan of fill in the blank, Iowa, Michigan, Nebraska, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, Florida, Florida State, Miami. If you're a fan of Georgia, LSU, we've got post-game shows for you. post-game shows, and we will announce a schedule each week so you can find those post-game shows that are going to be right here, but they're mostly going to be on those team-specific channels. So get pumped for those. And, of course, man, at this time in 2 weeks on this Friday night, I'm going to be recovering from 24 consecutive hours awake. Wink, wink, not quite. Going to take a couple naps, but we are going to deliver 24 consecutive hours of live call-in show engagement through the live chat. 24-hour live stream to kick off the 2021 college football season. That is going to start September 2nd, which if you follow around the clock, leads us from Wednesday late night, early Thursday morning, 2 a.m., all the way through the day of Thursday. And then we wrap up Thursday night, September 3rd, overnight at 2 a.m. The reason I selected that 24-hour time span is because we've got those opening games on Thursday night, and I figure all of you will want to talk to at least 2 in the morning. So why not start it at 2 in the morning the night before? 24 consecutive hours of live programming here at the Voice of College Football, and most of it's going to be me maybe sitting here, maybe moving around, maybe doing whatever I can to stay awake. So keep me awake for probably, I'm going to guess, 20 of those 24 hours. That way, if I say anything dumb throughout the weekend concerning the games, or you think some of my analysis is a bit off, I've got an excuse. Folks, you can help us out tremendously, but this is really not to help us out. I would like to see you gear up with some tremendous college football gear for the upcoming season. Just go to voiceofcollegefootball.com. Go to the top of the page there, voiceofcollegefootball.com. Go to the top of the page and click on Store. And I am attempting to get you a sample here, but this particular application doesn't have it. I saved all that, but it's not there. Regardless, go to voiceofcollegefootball.com, go to the top of the page, and click on Store for your college football apparel. Pick out your favorite team. We've got them all there. From the top, Matthew, good to see you, man. Lewis, shared and liked already. That's Lewis. That's what he does. He shares, he likes, participates. But he shares and likes first. Lewis, thank you so much for your contributions on Twitter in particular, and then coming in here and chopping it up with everyone. Web security. Hearing from a Clemson source close to the league that this alliance will involve more than scheduling. I believe after reading just one article on this, and I breezed through it, it's the main ESPN article, and I'm sure so much more has been written, that beyond scheduling, I think in this day and age, if these conferences are forward thinking, then they are thinking NIL. And I don't know how that's going to take place or what they could possibly do to sweeten the pot for prospective athletes to join a team, to join a program, go to school in one of those 3 conferences to help them get the jump financially on the SEC and in regards to luring in the better talent. But I am thinking that there's going to be a component of this that is going to involve NIL. I don't know what that's going to be. Some of you who are much more creative and have much more ingenuity than I do, you may have an idea or 2 or 50. So bring them. Web security also hearing they did this in the place of the 3 leagues expanding, so don't be expecting any additions. So I will get to my thoughts as we run through the live chat here. Louis Papp, also Pac-12 commissioner, he's not ruling out expansion. Jesus, maybe this will be its own tournament and they will have its own champion. No. They are ruining themselves if they're not including the SEC. It would not be considered a legitimate championship. I've got my thoughts. Yeah, web security. This is a play to counterbalance an out-of-control SEC. So the SEC is threatening to take over the sport. They've added 2 tremendous programs that are top 10 programs in terms of everything except for, in Texas's case, on the field right now. But in terms of facility, money, brand power, image, territory, recruiting footprint in Texas, these 2 additions are massive. Web security, they get of this wasn't done. The SEC would peach. Okay, can't really follow that. D-Rock, the gorilla in the room. If true, will Notre Dame make the move from independence? How will the remaking Big 12 teams make out? All right. I can already see that I'm going to have to pre-read these for typos. It's all good. Hey, Seuss, I like it that way. We can see games like Oregon, Iowa, and USC, Ohio State, and Stanford, North Carolina. Get Kansas and Notre Dame into the Big 10. Dominic, good to see you. Lewis, they should just split the 130 teams into 2 new divisions with their own playoffs. Okay. This would happen, Lewis, or something like that would happen if there was a governing body in control of the sport, or if there was connection between the leagues. This is not the NFL. This is not a professional sport where there is a governing body. There's a structure in place, an organization that oversees the entire deal. Then moves would be made for the greater good of the entire sport. But no, you've got individual conferences looking out for themselves. So that's not going to happen unless it just formulates that way through the various moves that are being made. George, like and shared. Yeah, I saw the same thing, web security, in which several people from the various leagues do not favor the proposed 12-team format. Hearing this alliance will lobby for 6 or 8 instead. That's been pretty well publicized. The American Football Network, as opposed to the American Football League, the American Football Conference, the American Conference. Okay. Glad to be connected to the American Football Network tonight. All right, George has an idea. He's got an idea. Take those 3 sorry conferences and put them all together. All together. Matthew, 8 teams does make sense. George, 64 teams makes sense. Actually, in one strange way, both of you make sense. For one and only one reason, both of those can make sense at the same time. Those are the perfect numbers. 8, 16, 32, 64. No buys. No buys. Hey, Cheryl. Good to see you again today. Cheryl and others joined us during our Oklahoma live stream this afternoon. Oklahoma fans, anybody listening right now that cares anything about Oklahoma football, we talk Oklahoma football every Friday live. American Football Network. Mark, do you still think Georgia will beat Clemson? Let me put it this way. I don't flip decisions just based on a few injuries, and I know that there are key injuries. I'm going to look at it, and you will get my prediction. So let's understand this, American Football Network. I feel very official, responding not to Cheryl or George or Dominic or whomever, but to the American Football Network. Is this being broadcast live on the American Football Network as well? I would like some type of royalty. Let's understand when I release my predictions that I'm making predictions for later in the season. So whether that's the first game of the season or the last game of the season, that's a prediction that holds. You can hold me to my prediction, do it the entire season, regardless of what happens with injuries or anything else. You can hold me to my predictions and say at the end of the year, Mark, you were wrong about this. And I will say, absolutely, I was wrong. But I am going to make weekly predictions as I have since 1982. 1982, this being 2021. Is this the 40th year I've been predicting college football games? 40 years predicting college football games, and I still remember my prediction record straight up the first year. 106 and 26. That was a pretty good year, like 83%. Anyway, so I will make a prediction on all the games the week of the games that may not necessarily be consistent with what my prediction was months prior. This is a bit of a different situation considering it's the first game of the season, but still, I've made my predictions. I'm in the process of unveiling my predictions. So yes, in looking at Georgia's schedule and Clemson's schedule, I had to make a determination on who was going to win that game. But I'm going to reevaluate before the game and make my prediction before the game. It may very well turn out to be exactly the same prediction, or it could change. I've yet to make that determination. I typically predict the games. Well, I have always predicted the games later and later every year. I used to release prediction videos on Wednesdays and Thursdays, and then it got to be Fridays, and then it was like 10 minutes before kickoff at noon on Saturday. But I will make a prediction on Clemson and Georgia when we get to that point. But yes, American Football Network, you are correct in sizing up my records for, well, one of those two teams that I did predict. Well, you can surmise that I predicted Georgia to beat Clemson, I guess. The Clemson prediction video is released, and I picked Clemson to go 8-0 in the ACC and 11-1 overall. Did they lose to South Carolina? Are they going to lose to Connecticut? Booming Sooners. Hey, Mark, you taking Nebraska or Illinois? And how about that Georgia-Clemson game? So this is a great opportunity, and so I will take it right now to let everybody know that you are not going to find a better deal than this anywhere. And if you do find a better deal than this, I want you to call me tonight and let me know where you find a better deal than this. Okay, join us on Patreon. And I thought for the last couple of football seasons that, so always in the past, I had released my prediction videos right here. So all my predictions are right here. And I don't necessarily, I might be wrong, so I don't want to state this for sure. I know that on College Game Day, for example, those guys make predictions every week. And unless somebody at home wants to keep track of that, hammer out some kind of Google Doc or spreadsheet and keep track of Herb Street, Corso, Pollock, Howard, all those guys, nobody knows what their records are. They could be missing 75% of the games. We have no idea. But they're all aired on television. And again, somebody could keep track. I don't see people necessarily publicizing their records, predicting college football games. With me, what you got from me every year and every week during the college football season was I would deliver my predictions, and you would see right on the screen, there's the record, good or bad. There's the record. For the past 2 football seasons, my predictions have been exclusively on Patreon. And I think if you understand anything about what we're doing here at the Voice of College Football, you can understand that. $5 a month, $5 a month, 17 cents a day, and you get the predictions right there. Okay. I guess, well, I figure my predictions are good enough. But in addition, this season, we are going to have predictions from 15 media members as well. So Steve Dace from Michigan Podcast, Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts, and Tony Gerdeman from Buckeye Scoop, Kevin Noon, our Ohio State guy from Buckeye Grove. Who else? We got the Wholesome One on board. We got Ty Hudson from Pig Trail Network, Jason Ray from Last Word on College Football, Kevin McGuffey and Tony Siracusa from Last Word on College Football. Oh, tons of media guys, like 15. And so all the predictions will be there weekly, right there on Patreon at the Voice of College Football. So just go to Patreon, MarkRogersTV, bam. And I will post a video if I remember. I promise to post videos at times, and we're posting so many videos. There has been a time or two that I have promised to post a video and did not. So I will admit to that. But I will send my prediction records out there. I'll probably post a video and just run a scroll, and you will see my prediction record year by year. So you can see whether it's worth 17 cents a day to join us for our predictions. I cannot vouch for anybody else in their predictions. I do not know what their record is. I know Steve Dace at Michigan Podcast does a ridiculously amazing job predicting futures, over-unders, and I would think that he picks the games extremely well week to week, straight up and against the spread. And you should probably join him on his Patreon channel as well if you want to pick up a few bucks. You know, that's $5 a month. My goodness. I know people that shell out like $1,000 to a betting website every college football season and NFL for that kind of advice. But we will do it right here on Patreon. So please join us there on Patreon. Just search Mark Rogers TV. If you haven't noticed, we're phasing out the Mark Rogers TV and very much phasing in, well, with a sledgehammer, phasing in the Voice of College Football. And there are reasons for that. All right. Where were we? So Booming Sooners. I think I called you something else the first time. Booming Sooners. I hope that you're locked in on our Oklahoma channel. You probably are. George thinks this is going to be Kirby's last year. Jackson Mac and Cheese Magoo. This is the first time I've ever seen your handle. I would have remembered this handle, especially since I'm starving right now. Jackson Mac and Cheese Magoo. Power 5 to become the Power 4. And you know what, Jackson Mac and Cheese Magoo? You know what this calls for? Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Jackson Mac and Cheese Magoo would love to know who you root for and how long you've been watching. And if it's been more than 2 days, why haven't you said hi? How will this alliance work? The Rod Farva. Let's get to it right now. Okay, let's get through the story online and then speculate on how this may work. Okay. Big Ten, ACC, Pac-12. Formally announce an alliance between the three leagues in the next 7 to 10 days. Formal alliance. The substance of the agreement remains in flux. So they're still figuring this out. Remains in flux. Okay. Confluence of seismic shifts within the college sports landscape. Okay. Name, image, and likeness. Playoff expansion. Supreme Court ruling against the antitrust litigation against the NCAA and its membership. And, of course, the SEC adding Texas and Oklahoma. Okay. One athletic director said, this is about philosophy. That's vague. Governance, a little clearer, but still tons of room for interpretation. Scheduling, we can get our teeth into that. News of the planned announcement was first reported by The Athletic. Okay, Texas, Oklahoma announced their intentions to move to the SEC. The Big Ten, the ACC, and the Pac-12 each began exploring options for a counter move. Alliance committee was put together involving various athletic directors from the conferences and commissioners, I should say, various conference commissioners. The scope of the alliance remains uncertain, according to one AD. While initial conversations involved all sports, recent discussions have focused on the moneymakers: football, men's basketball, women's basketball. Creating a non-conference scheduling partnership could also create lucrative TV opportunities. Okay, let's get to the scheduling. I need some help here because the only way in which I can figure out that a scheduling alliance is going to benefit all three of these leagues and also combat the SEC is for these three leagues to shut out the SEC in scheduling. Otherwise, why do it? I don't get it. Otherwise, you can always agree to schedule non-conference games against each other and just say, like the Big Ten and the Pac-12 did years ago, just say, we will put together some type of an agreement, and you are going to see more non-conference games scheduled between the Pac-12 and the Big Ten. Okay. We're in a situation where there are 8 conference games in some of the leagues and 9 conference games in other leagues. We are probably going to stay with the 12-game regular season schedule. I don't see that changing. So there would have to be a determination that the ACC would increase to 9 conference games, or the other 2 would decrease to 8 conference games. I don't see that happening. So the Pac-12, the Big Ten, and the ACC expect them to all align with 9 conference games. Okay, that would be number 1 under this scheduling dynamic. Number 2 would be, I would think that they're not going to phrase it like this. There is no way that they're going to phrase it or report it to be this, but they have so many teams, 14 ACC, 14 Big Ten, 12 Pac-12. You've got 40 schools. So, of course, we're going to stick to football. 40 schools. You only have 3 non-conference games. Some of those are going to be played against the FCS in the group of 5. That why structure and organize a scheduling alliance if you're going to continue to schedule games against the SEC? Because you're not going to have enough games to schedule against each other. And the benefit of having some kind of an alliance is going to be watered down to nothing, to have no impact. I would think, even though it's not going to be stated like this, that why don't we shut out the SEC in scheduling, and they will have no one to schedule out of conference. Now, we'll get to rivalry games in a second. And I am making this up as I go. So I have not thought about this for hours. I've been gone up until about 15 minutes before we went live here. So I am thinking this through and putting this together as I speak. But why would you put together a scheduling alliance and still schedule games against the SEC and allow them to benefit from interaction with your league? Why wouldn't you say, we've got enough powerhouse programs and strength in numbers here to only schedule non-conference Power 5 games, or what will most likely be Power 4 games, against each other? So for a portion of the season, like, the SEC will not be able to offer any attractive non-conference games. So you may say, so what? There's so many good games that can be scheduled in the SEC. They don't need any more attractive games. True, to a certain extent. But the college football fan loves, and some of the best and most watched games of the college football season are cross-sectional out-of-conference games, huge non-conference games. And now you will have a pool of teams, and let's look at the current landscape of the play on the field and how good these schools are in football. You have a pool of USC, Oregon, Washington, UCLA, Arizona State, Utah, Ohio State, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, Penn State, North Carolina, Clemson, Miami, Florida State. And then you've got a ton of other fairly attractive schools, like, from a football standpoint, Minnesota, Michigan State, Virginia, Boston College, North Carolina State. We could go on and on. I would think that they are going to shut out the SEC. Otherwise, I don't get it, unless there's something I'm not thinking of. And I will certainly take your calls, and I will take your comments in the live chat to determine, what am I not sizing up about what you benefit from a scheduling alliance if you don't shut out the SEC. Shut them out. Form an alliance, say rule number 1, and probably the last rule on the list, rule number 1, and the final rule is we're only scheduling games against each other out of conference. And that SEC schedule is still going to look good when they play conference games. But the Alabama schedule is going to be against everybody that they currently play, and a smattering of Texas and Oklahoma, and then nobody outside the SEC. Nobody. That's what I would do. If you want to take SEC, 2 of the best programs, other than Notre Dame, Ohio State, are they the next 2 on the board? Oklahoma and Texas. You can argue USC, Clemson now, but I'm taking all the factors into play, not just football on the field, but money, facilities, history, tradition, brand name, money, tradition, money into account. Ohio State, Notre Dame are the 2 left. Michigan, Texas, and Oklahoma were probably 2 of the top 5 or 6, and they've gone from being a part of balancing out the SEC into the SEC. So I think they're being bold here without, most likely, I don't think they're going to realign. I don't think. I might be wrong. For those of you who have watched me for quite some time, you know, I get on here a lot of times and say, I'm just flat out right about this, or I know this, or I think I've got a really good plan. Now, poke holes in it, but I think this is a really good plan, or a really good playoff system, or a really good scheduling system. But there are other times, like with NIL, when that hit, we had great debate on here. We had great discussion, and I readily said, I'm throwing out a ton of theories and philosophies of what I think is beneficial to the sport or to the athletes and what's not, what's good, what's bad, what's going to work, what's not going to work, what could be an issue down the road. I threw out all sorts of scenarios, but I readily said, I don't know. So I will tell you when I feel as though I've got a grip on this particular topic, or I know, believe me, I know I've worked here or there or done this or that. But there are other times you guys have a lot better ideas than I do. When it came to NIL, I came up with 50 different theories and philosophies on how this could go. And some are playing out and some are not. Some may down the road, some will not. This is another one. I am making all sorts of speculations. And without thinking it through, I have just presented one plan that, unless I'm missing something, I would certainly implement if I was the Pac-12, the Big Ten, and the ACC. And that's, call it, what's a nice corporate HR name for it? Consolidated scheduling. Something like that. All right. Our number here. So before we change out the ticker on the bottom of the screen, weekly picks from me, which I have felt has been good enough, but I'm just kidding. I hope you guys know when I'm kidding. Going to get copyrighted by YouTube. But 15 other media members, they're on Patreon. So our number is 860-499-3332. And we don't have to talk about this. I say that every call-in show, I propose a topic. This is certainly the biggest topic of the day or the week or the season or the off season, pretty much all of it, aside from NIL and the 12-team playoff proposal that may get put on hold. But I want to talk about whatever you guys want to talk about, because before this came out, my original idea was we are going to preview your team. Whoever you want to preview, we're going to preview them. James needs help with week 0. George, thank you for the hit there. George is a great supporter, has been for so long, and I believe George, there's no question. George takes the title as the, man, I just came up with a decent idea, and that doesn't happen very often. I'm not an idea guy, but I actually came up with a decent idea as I was spitting this out. George has commented to the channel more than anybody. I can say that without any consideration. He's the king. Got John and a big greetings from Morgantown, West Virginia. And where are the Mountaineers going to land? Is it the ACC or is it somewhere else? David, glad that you are here to report that the middle school lunchroom is intact. Don says all Pac-12 and Big Ten, 14 teams, are protecting the Rose Bowl and money, period, granddaddy of them all. Okay. Thank you, sir. John, I don't know if I always do a great job. The effort's always there, but we have our good days and our not so good days. But you guys are consistently awesome. Matthew, you won't have time for all those shows. Going to have to hire help. Yeah, I'm not cloning myself. We are going to cover all those post-game shows a different way. I am going to be here, as I have been for the last several years, for college football all day on Saturday. Our national show with me, national show here, team-specific shows are going to be on those team-specific channels. Iowa on the Iowa channel, Nebraska, Michigan, Ohio State, hopefully Penn State, we'll see. hopefully Georgia, we'll see, Texas A&M, Florida, Florida State, Miami, Oklahoma, Notre Dame. Yes, D-Rock. This is finally sinking through. After I mention and talk about something about, I think after the 52nd time, bam, or sorry, D-Rock, boom, post-game specific team channels. Nathan Erbach is hosting our Notre Dame shows. Now, for the channels that are not quite as strong in their subscriber base, I do not want our host to be talking to nobody. So I will find a way for those to be simulcasted somewhere else. So the Notre Dame post game will most likely be simulcast right here. Thomas, will Ohio State make the playoffs? Now, there is a direct question. I posted something on Twitter earlier today with the preseason polls, both the AP and the coaches poll being released over the last week. And just, again, for those of you who have been watching for quite some time, you know my strengths, you know my weaknesses. We'll ignore the weaknesses. We don't want to report those. The strengths, in terms of what I'm doing here, I remember stuff. I remember plays and games and players. Players not as much as I used to, man. I used to remember, every player. Anyway, but games and scores and rankings, that sort of thing. Like talking to the Ohio State crowd here the other night, and they brought up the 1992 Super Bowl, 37-24, boom. So anyway, what is astounding in going through, I posted videos on some trends in preseason and postseason poll rankings for particular teams. I did one on Clemson, Michigan, Ohio State, and I'll do some other ones. Miami. Is that the consistency of Ohio State's program since Jim Dressel took over is remarkable. It really is. Maybe they've lost some close games in big games. Maybe they've been blown out in big games. They haven't always completed the deal. They have the 2 national championships in that span. And if you know me, again, I discredit national championships to a certain extent. I'm not saying that they're completely meaningless, but they're not quite as important. And they're not, well, they're important because that's all anybody cares about. Let me choose my words more correctly. They're not as valid as they are in any other sport. The validity of the national championship in college football is less than it is in any other sport. But the consistency of the Buckeyes to place in the top 5 of the nation since Jim Tressel's second year, they have been in the top 5 in the country almost every year. And so we were looking at 20 years. That doesn't answer your question, does it, Thomas? Do I believe Ohio State's going to make the playoffs? My predictions are being released. After I release all the prediction videos, then we're going to do the playoffs, the conference championships, and the playoffs. Hey, Joey. Good to see you, man. HMan998. All is well. Hope all is well with you as well. South Carolina plays whom? Week 1? Nobody of note, I don't think. Get a win. Get a win for Shane Beamer. Get him off to a good start. McD's here. Oh, we got calls coming in. My apologies. Here we go. Let's knock them out. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark. This is Nick.
Hey, Nick. What's going on? Hey, Nick. What's a good word? Hello, Nick.
Not much. How are you tonight?
I'm doing just fine.
Couple things real quick. This is the internet, but would it be okay to say first time, long time?
Heck yeah. Do it. Love that. So this is your first time calling.
First time, long time.
Have you ever left any comments in the live chat?
Once or twice.
Wow. So you've been watching for a long time and we've never heard from you. Well, Nick, it's good to hear from you tonight. As somebody I know likes to say,
and
I'm here now. That's all that matters. Here now. So how long is a long time?
Absolutely. I guess a year now.
Okay. Thank you for that. Appreciate
Maybe
it.
A year. Yeah. Yeah. And really love Steve Davis. Love seeing you have Steve on.
Most people do. He either gets a lot of pats on the back, and for the people that don't necessarily like him, they still like to watch him.
I'm sure people that don't like him, that probably has more to do with his political commentary than probably his football commentary.
At times. So what's up, Nick?
The main reason I called, and by the way, it's Ned, N-E-D, Ned.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ned.
No problem. The main reason I called is I watched in agony last night the video from a couple of days ago when the guy called in and wanted to argue with you about how great he thinks it is to see colleges play at neutral field. And I was like, this guy needs to put down the crack pipe. It's obvious he did not go to school at a college that has college football, and certainly not big time. As a Clemson guy, I can promise you, if you went to any of the internet chat boards for Georgia or Clemson, now we're all excited. Georgia and Clemson should play each other every year. It's a rivalry that goes back to the 60s. We used to play every year in the 70s and the early to mid 80s. Clemson and Georgia are literally about 70 miles apart. When I was at Clemson, we used to go to Athens and party sometimes. You could go into a bar in Clemson on any given night, and there'd be kids from Athens there. People from Clemson dated girls at Georgia, vice versa. You know, there's the recruiting against each other. So many ties between the schools. And it's just a great college rivalry. None of the fans at Clemson or Georgia are excited about playing in Bank of America Stadium. I can promise you that. Yeah, we're excited for the game because we're excited for college football to finally be here. But not a single fan of either school would say they would rather be at Bank of America or at the Georgia Dome, or I guess now it's Mercedes Stadium or whatever. They would much rather be in Death Valley or between the hedges. And all you have to do is go to one game between the hedges, one game in Death Valley, and you won't need anyone to explain anything to you. It will explain itself. And the thing about going back to campus, I mean, Steely Dan even wrote a song about it. My old school. It's 20 years, 30 years, 40 years after you graduate. You can't wait for college football season to roll around. You can go back home again. You know, to walk around, and you know, college football is so unique. It's so American. It's so unique. The pageantry, the history, the tradition, and you get to walk around that campus. You get to walk around, and you know, in college football, you know, it's such a rural, small town kind of sport. I mean, yeah, there are some schools like Georgia Tech or Southern Cal that are in big cities, but I mean, most colleges are small towns, college towns, and you get to go back and you walk around downtown. You walk around campus, and man, it just takes you back. It just takes you back to when you were there. And high school and college, that's the greatest time of your life. Those are your formative. So many people meet their wives in college, make lifetime friends for the first time from somewhere other than their hometown. Tailgating. A lot of people buy season tickets and they tailgate for 50 years in the same parking spot. And they get to see people around them that they haven't seen since last football season. And let me tell you something that'll blow you away. And this right here gets to the heart of what's so special about college football. On TigerNet, which is a big message board for Clemson fans and news site, I read about a couple of years ago this family from Australia that saw Clemson play in the playoffs became fascinated with college football, became fascinated with Clemson. They watched Clemson. They get up in the middle of the night or early in the morning to watch Clemson play on TV, on the internet. And they saved money for like 3 or 4 years. And 2 years ago, they took a vacation and went to Clemson and saw a football game in Death Valley. And you hear crazy stories like that at schools that are big in football. And they want to go to these college, people from all over the world. They become fascinated by this. And they want to go see, how does this teeny little town with only a few thousand people all of a sudden on Saturdays have 80-something thousand people in the stands to watch these guys play football that is unique to America. And, they get to meet people on the message boards and they get invited to people's tailgates. They ended up spending the night at people that lived in the local area and didn't even have to pay for a hotel. And it was like the experience of a lifetime. And that's just one example of what makes college football so special. I mean, what do you think? I'm sure you've heard millions of stories like that.
Well, I think that college football has a unique quality of its own. That much of what you just described there. That the product on the field is it's a huge part of why I love the game, but it's not a better product on the field than the NFL. The reason it is in most people's minds, or a lot of people's minds that are obviously congregated here, a better product than the NFL is the energy, the spirit, the pride, the tradition, the prestige, everything that goes into the events surrounding the game. And those run deep within families and communities and are just extremely important. I saw a video today of a Clemson fan. He tagged me on the video where he is basically building out his front yard to resemble the hill at Clemson Stadium, Death Valley, the Howard's Rock, and he's going to go through all the work and configuring all that, landscaping all that. He's working on it. So people are nuts. And again, it's not just rabid fans, but it runs through bloodlines and it runs through generations of bloodlines. Yeah, as you can tell from my conversation with the Reasonable Gump, is what you cited there. My thoughts are pretty obvious.
Yeah, I mean, in college football, and I played football and ran track as a kid. If I hadn't had a car accident, I would have played at Clemson and ran track at Clemson. My two best friends played at Clemson. I remember as a little kid going to Clemson and playing on the hill. I remember when Clemson and Notre Dame played each other home and away. I think it was 77, 78, or either 78, 79. The first year we played Joe Montana. Clemson it was in Death Valley.
Mm-hmm.
Clemson had the lead, and Montana brought them back and won at the very end. The next year, my dad and I were out in the woods, cutting wood for the fireplace for the winter. We had the doors up because, I mean, you went and did stuff because back then there were only a few games a week. I mean, you count on one hand the games that were on TV back then. And we were out in the woods. I guess I was about 12. We were out in the woods. We had the radio on to listen to the game on the truck radio. And it was when Steve Fuller was quarterback, and we beat Notre Dame in South Bend the following year. And we were listening, but man, the game got tight late. And we stopped what we were doing, and we sat there and we listened to the rest of the game sitting on the tailgate. Just memories like that are just one of the things that make it so special. And when I was at Clemson, I had friends that played soccer and tennis at Clemson that were from Europe and all parts of the world. And those guys now, they can't wait for homecoming to fly back to America. A lot of them actually just stayed in America, but a lot of them want to come back to America once every few years and every year for homecoming, the soccer team. And Clemson won 2 national championships in soccer when I was there, 84 and 88. And those guys have a big reunion every year at homecoming. My roommate was a wrestler my senior year, one of my best friends. Those guys have a reunion every year. These guys.
I just want to say thank you so much for the call. Again, I got a line of calls here, but thank you so much for your take on campus games. Appreciate that.
Yeah, it's just, to wrap it up, it's just, I can't believe anyone that's ever been to a college football game on campus, especially in a college town like Clemson or Athens or Gainesville, how they could ever think that something at a neutral site is better than that. It's just crazy. And hey, man, love your show. Keep up the great work.
Thanks, Ned. Appreciate it. Have a good night. All right. Did have a line of calls. I think some people maybe got a little impatient and frustrated. So I'll try to keep these calls moving through a little bit quicker. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
It's Joey Foster.
Hey, Joey. How you doing?
Hi, dude. I'm doing good, buddy. I wanted to talk about the alliance between the conferences today. And I know I was in some chat rooms earlier while the news was coming out, and the people were talking about, well, this means no one's going to expand. But the Pac-12 since said that they've been talking to teams out of the Big 12 about expansion. So I believe all 3 conferences may expand. And I think that will mean that Notre Dame will join into a conference. I think they will join the ACC and probably bring in West Virginia with them. I don't see Notre Dame sitting back knowing they can't get a bye week in a playoff game without being a member of a conference. And I do not believe they would have voted for that. And they did vote for this expansion and for the playoff expansion. I don't think they would have voted for that knowing that they couldn't have a bye week if they weren't planning on joining a conference. And that's really all I wanted to say, and I'll let you talk about that if you like.
Well, Joey, I appreciate the call. So, yeah, Joey just brings up that he thinks that Notre Dame, especially since we've known for 6 months. So at the time that the Texas-Oklahoma expansion discussion or realignment into the SEC was the news was broken. We found out that they had been in discussions for 6 months. It only makes sense that that word would have not just been isolated to Notre Dame or to Texas and Oklahoma and the SEC, but Notre Dame agreeing to the college football playoff proposal that was obviously being discussed at the same time as Texas, Oklahoma. Would the theory there is that they agreed to that, knowing that they would join a conference. Again, we don't know. We don't know. My guess would be yes, that Notre Dame was privy to that information and therefore made the determination that they did. Or it is possible that Notre Dame is not considering the bye week or knows of this situation right now that we may have some pushback. We've heard it from some pretty prominent people that there is pushback to the 12-team playoff and that it may be downsized to 6 or 8. All right. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hello, this is Jack.
I'm sorry. Who's this?
Jack.
Hey, Jack. How you doing? I think we can hear you well enough.
How are you?
What's on your mind tonight?
Good. Well, I'm an Indiana fan. I'm a fan of the Big Ten and everything like that. And the Pac-12, ACC, Big Ten Alliance, do you think that they're trying to protect the bowl bid for them, like in specific bowl games like they have together? Or do you think it's just for the Rose Bowl game they're trying to protect with this alliance here?
Well, somebody else had commented on the Rose Bowl in the live chat. I'm not understanding necessarily what's in jeopardy concerning the Rose Bowl as well. As long as the Pac-12 and the Big Ten, the conferences are protected, which they are, there's no threat to the Pac-12 or the Big Ten currently. So for the other bowl games, again, you would have to explain what's your thought process on how these games are in jeopardy?
Well, I'm thinking more like if Big Ten, for example, doesn't have enough bowl teams to make it, and the SEC is another tie into that game, would they go to like an ACC and say, since you guys are having an alliance, you pick an ACC team to play the Pac-12 team, even though the SEC and Big Ten are in that like alliance with them for the bowl game, like you did.
I apologize. I couldn't make much of that out. We don't have a very good connection, unfortunately. So one more time, give it to me.
Okay, so for example, like the Outback Bowl, that's like the Big Ten and the SEC.
Sure.
So would they go to like the Pac-12 or the ACC and pick a team out of there, even though the SEC and the Big Ten have the bowl bid for that game?
Would who do that?
I don't know. I'm not thinking because like I did hear people say this, like some bowl games, they're thinking like the ACC was trying to send a team to an Outback Bowl because they have this alliance here, so they don't face a Big Ten team, but have like an ACC or a Pac-12 team face that Big Ten team instead of having the SEC team.
I'm sorry, sir. I really can't. The phone connection is just too garbled. I'm not really getting. I'm hearing Outback Bowl and conferences, but I'm not getting anything beyond that. So, give us a call back.
All right.
All right. Unfortunately, I don't know if you guys could hear that. I could not make anything out of that. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, how you doing, man? This is Daryl, man. First time listener. Been enjoying the show so far.
Nice.
I had a question.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on the University of Memphis? And before you give your thoughts on it, I'm currently in the Pacific Northwest, where I moved out ahead of my son, expecting that he was going to be going to the University of Washington. And I had to find out on the internet that my son decided to go to the University of Memphis. He had 23 Division I scholarship offers, and he selected Memphis. And I'm an avid college football fan, but I've never ever paid very close attention to the University of Memphis.
Well, are you a college basketball fan?
Not really. I know Penny Hardaway is coach there. I met him on campus when we went to do a walkthrough of campus, but not a big basketball fan of University of Memphis.
So obviously Memphis has a long and storied basketball history. They've been to Final Fours. They've been to a national championship game. So they've got a great basketball history, and they've been extremely good even as of, I don't follow college basketball anymore, but as of about 10 or 12 years ago, they were pushing a Final Four. Don't think they quite made it against Kansas. But anyway, and then that is the result of tremendous basketball being played on the high school level within the Memphis metro area, as I understand it. The closest I ever got to actually spending time in Memphis. Now, I've been to Memphis twice for a very historical landmark that some people could guess. I've been there twice. But I lived about 2.5 or 3 hours away from Memphis when I covered the SEC. I lived in Mississippi, and I covered Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Alabama. And I did go to a game. I actually went to Peyton Manning. Was that his first start? Anyway, it was one of his first starts in the Liberty Bowl against Ole Miss. And I went to that game to cover that game. But that was my only other trip in Memphis. But having covered Ole Miss football, of course, they had a huge, and still do, a huge alumni base in Memphis. So from a football standpoint, Memphis is in an interesting position. The city is, of course, on the border of Arkansas, where you've got an SEC team, on the border of Mississippi, right, with 2 SEC teams. And then, of course, in the state of Tennessee, where the majority of the state roots for the University of Tennessee. The football program has been generally down for decades up until about 5 years ago. Justin Fuente took over, the current Virginia Tech head coach. He did a remarkable job of reviving the program. Now, what approach he took to do that, I don't know. But Mike Norvell then took it over, and Memphis has been a very strong football program now for 5 or 6 years.
Well, my son is Andrew Jones. He passed on some very big offers. Florida State wanted him. TCU wanted him. Every university in Louisiana wanted him. But I don't know what he saw in Memphis. It's a beautiful campus, and it has from what I see, it's a beautiful program. Just that, for the life of me, I can't figure out what made him make the choice. But I'm going to support him anyway. But that was my. I just wanted to put him out. I'll go ahead and let some other callers give him a chance to come.
Well, I appreciate.
I really love the show.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the show. But I got one question for you concerning your son and the decision he made. I've got to think that his relationship with the people there and the coaches had much to do with it.
Could be. Now, I can tell you this. I played ball in high school. Actually, Marshall and I played in the same high school team together. And I've been to a lot of campuses. The way that they are, and I can't say for me, their welcoming process with taking the new players in on campus is phenomenal. Not only are the coaches there, but the coaches' wives are there. They're actually moving the kids in, getting them inside the dorm, talking to the parents. I mean, not some of them, not most of them, all of them are there. And I can say that was the thing that really grabbed me. But I got from a notoriety standpoint, I couldn't figure out why my son chose it. But nevertheless, hey, maybe he can make an impact there. You know, maybe he didn't want to go to a big program, such as an LSU. Maybe he wanted to go to a smaller program and make a big impact. That could be it. But look him up. His name is Andrew Jones. He's from out of graduated from John Eric, right outside of New Orleans, and he had a fantastic year last year. He did.
We will keep an eye out for Mr. Andrew Jones. Well, you must be very proud.
They call him. I am. I am. They call him the monster from Marrero.
Okay. Well, and you must have done an outstanding job to put him in a position to further his education and receive a scholarship there. That's amazing.
Yeah.
But I appreciate the call.
Really. All right. Thank you, man. Bye-bye.
Have a good night. All right. Let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. I believe we've got Emmanuel on the line.
Hey, what's going on, Mark?
Not too much. What's up?
Hey, I just had a quick, I know it never happened. I don't believe going to Notre Dame, one of my favorite teams to watch at one point, basically the first college football team I watched. But I don't believe they'll go to a conference, but I always saw them, if they ever joining the Big Ten. Geographically, I think it makes sense. The style of play that they've had in the past, I think it matches Big Ten football. What are your thoughts? Could it ever happen? And I know the ACC, they're there with basketball, but I like Notre Dame in the Big Ten. What do you think?
So I've addressed this topic, as you can imagine, a number of times, and here's my thought, is that I'm a football guy. I enjoy football, love football. We're here to talk football. So I see this from a football standpoint, but understand that there are so many other factors involved. So anytime I address conference expansion, realignment, teams moving, I think of football and I think of market size, TV ratings, because that's the world I lived in for 30 years. And then I also think about money. Those are the things I think of when it comes to academics. I think that's extremely important, of course. That's why we've got all the tall buildings on campus. But that's for other people to figure out who belongs and who does not belong academically. And then in regards to the other sports, I can speculate because I've got a brain and I've covered sports my whole life. But I'm not currently really attached to the other sports to know the current status. But here's the deal with Notre Dame. On the plus side of Notre Dame joining the Big Ten are a lot of things that you just stated. Notre Dame historically looks like a Big Ten team, acts like a Big Ten team, is located right in the middle of Big Ten. You talk about the epicenter of Big Ten football geographically. When you start from the north in Minnesota and the west in Nebraska and the east Rutgers and you funnel it all to the middle, Notre Dame couldn't be more exact in Big Ten country geographically. Of course, three of the school's biggest rivals historically. Now, for anybody that's only been watching college football, and we do have a lot of people that are in their late teens, let's say, that watch our show, may not fully understand that Notre Dame's longstanding football rivalries for decades were against Michigan, Michigan State, and Northwest and Purdue, and from time to time have signed a series to play Penn State, for example. Played Penn State quite a bit in the 80s in particular and early 90s. So from a football standpoint, from a geography standpoint, and not just the football, but the football tradition, Notre Dame is just, they fit like a glove in the Big Ten. But that's just football. There's a history there between the Big Ten Conference and Notre Dame that isn't necessarily the best. And there are various stories out there about who spurned whom, and who wanted to join and did not want to join at various times throughout history. And so I think there's a little bit of bad blood between the Big Ten and Notre Dame, number one. Number two, they've already locked arms with the ACC. Now, of course, that didn't happen in football, but still, that is a lot of sports programs to lift out of a conference and then take to another conference. And I don't think that Notre Dame would join the Big Ten in football and still leave all of its other sports programs in the ACC. I'm not saying that it cannot happen, but I just think all the decisions that they've made have them most likely joining the ACC if they are going to join a conference in football.
Absolutely. I agree, but I just, it just seems perfect. Obviously the Michigan State, Michigan, Purdue rivalry, but I mean, Notre Dame, Northwestern makes Notre Dame, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Wisconsin, Notre Dame, Nebraska. They just seem like they're perfect, seeing that year in and year out.
Well, what do you
way
telling me?
more
What are you
than
telling
like
me here?
Notre Dame,
Like,
Georgia Tech.
yeah, Notre Dame, Virginia, that doesn't get you excited. Notre Dame, North Carolina State, Notre Dame and Syracuse. Those games don't get you
North
excited.
Carolina.
Yeah, there is no connection between there is absolutely zero connection between Notre Dame and the ACC. None. Zero. The only one, okay, I'll amend that statement. There is a rivalry between Notre Dame and Boston College. Other than that, there's no connection between Notre Dame and the ACC. They've played some series through the years against Pitt and against really hardly anyone else consistently. Yeah, there's just no connection.
Yeah, the only connection, maybe if you want to go back to, what is it, Catholics versus convicts with Miami and, the rivalry, I guess, with the national championship with Florida State.
I don't consider.
But other than that, I mean, Notre Dame, Wake Forest. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. I guess I'll let you go, so I'll let someone else call. But what do you think is the percentage that Notre Dame joins the conference? I'm thinking like 5%.
Joins a conference?
Yeah, to join
any conference.
Any conference, yeah.
I'm more in the 15% range for any conference. If I was the Big Ten, I would make a play for Notre Dame. I'd say, you know what, let the past be the past. What do we need to do to make this happen? And I would roll out all the numbers to say the ACC does not bring in the money that we do. We pay out twice as much money as the ACC per school. We're in line with your football brand. We have the tradition that you have. Your football team does not have to travel all over the place to play in Boston and Miami and all these other places. We're right here, and it all makes sense. And the Big Ten TV ratings far surpass the ACC. Let's make this happen.
I hope God's hearing you and it happens.
Kevin Warren,
I really do.
Hear me.
It would be nice.
I guess he would be the first one.
All right.
Well, I appreciate the call.
Awesome. Hey, thanks a lot, Mark. You're the best.
You too.
Take care.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. More calls coming in here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate everybody being here. BGPO Football Funk. DeAndre, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for the contribution tonight. I want to remind everyone before I take the next call here real quick, voiceofcollegefootball.com. You guys know one thing. You know that I may not be the best sports host, college football host in the world. You may know a lot of things. The one thing that you also know is that I'm always going to tell you the truth. So the truth here is that if you go to voiceofcollegefootball.com, that's a website that we built out a few months ago and launched a few months ago, that we have big plans for it. Right now, you're not going to find anything there that you can't find here. So I'm not going to try to fool you to say, go to voiceofcollegefootball.com. We've got some great content there. No, you're going to see a bunch of links. It's a pretty site, so check it out. But you're just going to see links to our other channels. So we are probably not going to be able to do anything special with it during the college football season because I'm going to be running around like a chicken with my head cut off. But after the season, a lot of great things planned. But for right now, there are basically two reasons why you go there. Number one, we've got college football gear representing every team in the Power 5 and others in the Group of 5 and FCS. So check it out. Go to voiceofcollegefootball.com. You might find some great stuff there. I have received some tremendous feedback from people that have found items that they really love. So go to voiceofcollegefootball.com. Go to the top of the screen where it says store and check it out. Reason number two is if you would like to write for us, you can be a writer for the Voice of College Football. Go to voiceofcollegefootball.com. Go to the top of the screen there. It says write for us. And check it out. Thank you so much for that. Also, 2 weeks from tonight, and our caller 2 callers ago just said that he just found us tonight. So he's going to think I'm totally insane when I say that we're going to be on for 24 consecutive hours live. I'm going to try to make it I will make it for most of it. I'm going to take a few naps for 1 to 2 hours. But I will be here for almost all of that. And it starts Wednesday night into Thursday morning, 2 a.m. Eastern time. That's to take us through the entire day on Thursday, through the college football games on Thursday night, all the way to 2 a.m. And then I am going to crash. And then again, post-game shows. Hummus Hero asked about an Oregon show. Yes, I have been promoting that we will have an Oregon post-game show, but that may fall through. So hang tight. Our host is moving on to other things, and so we may not be able to deliver on the Oregon show. We shall see. All right, let's get back at it. That's right. We got more calls lined up. Here we go. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Well, you go from the man that gives college football its voice to now doing a 24-hour live stream to the hardest working man in college football, I think. Maybe that would be more applicable. Well, what do you think?
Or the college football person who has no voice at the end of 24 hours. Maybe it's going to be that.
Well, get the coffee ready, Mark Rogers, for that 24 hours.
You know the last time, David, the last time I drank coffee?
No.
The last time not that I expected you to have the answer. The last time I had coffee was I was about 22 or 3 years old. It was my first job out of college, and I was doing play-by-play for the state high school football playoffs in Ohio. And it was so cold that night that just to keep my jaw loose so I could talk, I just shoveled down the coffee like nobody's business. I don't drink coffee. I only drank it because it was so hot that I could keep my jaw loose, but I don't drink coffee. So I don't know how I'm going to keep myself awake.
Old Channel 23 News with my man Phil Ferguson, right, Mark?
Yeah, back in those days. It was just a little after those days. So that was my internship during college. This was just after college for country music radio station WNCO, calling some high school football state playoff games for them.
Okay.
All right, David. What's on your mind?
Well, I want to give you a call. I enjoyed, by the way, you and Steve Dace on one podcast. By the way, so much college football knowledge in one room. It's just amazing to me. By the way, should not be allowed.
I will say that he is the one guy. Not that I don't respect all of our guests. Of course, I do. But he is the one guy that I got to admit. I will admit this publicly. That especially when he asked me to do his Michigan podcast every Tuesday. I knew that this would be one time that I just didn't roll out of bed and just start talking, because that's what happens half the time here is I just sit down and click record and just start talking. Like, I don't give it any thought, any preparation, but I thought, man, if I'm going to be on his show every Tuesday, I better be on my game, because otherwise he's just going to lay me to waste. Not that he doesn't anyway, but I got to come prepared.
Well, there you go. Well, he did bring up a couple things. First of all, I always wondered, did you guys ever broach the topic? One of the interesting things about the Harbaugh era, and we're going to look back on it because I believe this is the end, unless he pulls out a miracle this year, which I think is unlikely. But, obviously I'm coming from an Ohio State fan perspective on that. So the one thing I was going to say is, did you ever ask him the Don Brown question? Because one of the failures I always thought of the Harbaugh years is, why did he keep Don Brown for an extra year or two? Did Dace ever answer that question? I was just curious.
Dace has not answered that question. I have not asked the question. I would think Don Brown's swan song should have been the Ohio State game in 2018.
Right. Well, you'd think that, and then he got another try, and then Ohio State dropped 56 on him the next year, and Harbaugh still keeps him, which, blew me away at that time. So I always wonder if that's something he's, and I listen to Dave's podcast, from time to time, and I never heard him mention that subject as far as, why didn't Harbaugh get rid of him? That's why I didn't know if you ever broached that subject with him.
David, to be fair, I'm rethinking this, and it's easy to say now, but if we rewind a few years and look through Don Brown's accomplishments in fielding a top 5 to 10 defense in the country year after year, it wouldn't have really been reasonable to fire him after the Ohio State game in 2018. They had a top 5 to 10 defense in the nation. They played extremely well the entire season. They get torched for 62 points, sure, but it's one game at that point. Maybe after the next year, thinking, okay, you're still fielding a really good defense, and this may be pretty harsh, but the standard is the standard. Now, this is 2 consecutive years that you have shown no ability to adjust and prepare for this offense. And it's not like Ohio State scoring 60 points against everybody. So if you can't stop this offense, you've proven yourself. Bye. So after the 2019 game, I would have let him go.
Right, I agree. I mean, you could have made a case after 2018, but I get your point as well. Now, and I also agree with you. I mean, now he faced 2 of the best Ohio State quarterbacks in recent memory, or the 2 best Ohio State quarterbacks I've seen probably since Floyd Smith at the very least, and maybe the 2 best I've seen, at least from a performance standpoint, the 2 best I've seen. And, that's unfortunate, but your point is well taken. I mean, it's not like we were dropping 56 and 62 on everybody. So, and we were certainly dropping 56 and 62 on defenses that were lesser than Michigan too. So, that also has got to be taken into consideration. So, yeah, I was surprised by that. He did bring up a couple of points, during your guys' conversation that I found to be interesting. He had mentioned the Indiana point about them being maybe, and we talked about this, maybe a little bit overrated and maybe overachieved in the COVID year. But, I brought up that point about Texas A&M, and he's much higher on Texas A&M than I am. And I think Texas A&M may have taken advantage of a COVID year. Because I think he's got Texas A&M in his top 6 or 7 or something in his rankings, I thought.
Yeah, so he's not so he's got a pretty conventional view of what other people think of Texas A&M this year, but in an unconventional way, in that they're going to pull off the big upset against Alabama, but then lose 2 other games and lose ability to control the division and go to the SEC championship game. I'm pretty much right there with everybody else on Texas A&M. Maybe not quite as high, but I do have them competing heavily in that division.
Well, I would have picked the LSU for second place in that division, although some of the injuries that they've got right now. Although I wonder if this Johnson at quarterback, as you mentioned before, with the quarterback that got hurt, I'm wondering if this is really a downgrade, though. With the quarterback that got hurt for them, if they've really downgraded that much a quarterback.
Yeah, so Brendan
They
played
might be
well.
as good or a better team.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Brendan played well last year, and it was my thought that it was a significant downgrade at the time. Before I watched Max Johnson play, I just assumed, okay, Miles Brennan is a guy that before Joe Burrow showed up was supposed to be in line as a 4-star to take over that job, and actually competed with Burrow in, it must not have been much of a competition in camp, but going into it, it was a competition in 2018. And so then Miles Brennan throws 11 touchdowns in 3 games, and they're scoring like crazy. But Max Johnson came in, and I didn't pay close enough attention to really evaluate his play. So I'm not going to pretend that I really was watching closely against Ole Miss and Florida to say, I'm just going statistically that he performed well and they put up points in those games with Max Johnson down the stretch. He also played split time with Finley against Texas A&M, and that was an ugly offensive performance in which they didn't score until there was like 45 seconds left in the game. They were virtually shut out against Texas A&M. So there was good and bad there.
Right. I mean, by the way, he brought up a good point on that UCLA game to start the year. Only a 4-point line is a little bit surprising considering, LSU is probably more talented at just about every position than, than UCLA is. And, at probably 90-some% of the positions, and to only be a 4-point favorite, even though the game is there, that is really surprising, by the way. That did surprise me when you guys brought that up.
Yeah, see, I thought before the lines were released that would be a game that I was going to jump on UCLA as a 10-point underdog, because I thought, okay, they're playing at home, game number 1. I do think UCLA is significantly improved. I do think that LSU tends to slop around and make mistakes and not play up to its talent level. So I was expecting a line at like 10, and that I was going to get ahead of the curve and take UCLA with the points. But when that came out at 3, I thought, my goodness, 3 points between those two teams. But I will be hesitant at 4. As you well know, 7 and 3 are the two key numbers in the betting world.
I agree.
But it's going to be difficult for me to not take LSU to cover that, even at 4. I didn't like it going from 3 to 4, but still.
Yeah, I got to think they're at least a touchdown better than a mark. I would feel comfortable with it, but that's just me.
Yeah.
Bring up. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, it's just 3 or 4 points. UCLA could play a remarkably close game and still lose by a touchdown to 10 points. They could play extremely well, play out of their minds, and stay in that game and still lose 30-23.
Right. Exactly. So it's still a competitive game, but obviously LSU still covers. Yeah. To the Clemson Georgia game. By the way, I didn't realize Georgia was going to be down some starters going into that game until he mentioned it. I know the one receiver, isn't there one receiver, the best receiver, Pickens, not going to be playing that game?
Well, the issue is that we had our Georgia guy on this week, and so George Pickens is out, their best receiver coming into, and of course he's been hurt for quite some time. But then you got Kyrus Jackson and Burton, who are both, so Pickens caught whatever he caught last year, like 35 balls. Then they had 2 guys in Jackson and Burton who were in the 30 reception range, their second and third leading receivers last year, and they're both hobbling around.
Yeah. Well, by the way, I confirmed with Uncle Lou, and maybe this isn't, because I couldn't think of that many NFL receivers out of Georgia, but he thinks there's no doubt Pickens is the best receiver at Georgia since A.J. Green.
Wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's saying something. Now, I couldn't think of too many really star receivers after A.J. Green at Georgia. The only one that came to mind is Hardman, who's playing with the Chiefs, but
Sure.
He says he thinks that's the best receiver they've had since AJ Green. So that could play a big role. I think there is less margin for. I mean, because of the schedule. I mean, Clemson's schedule is so light after that game, Mark. I mean, they could afford to lose and still be okay. I mean, they don't even get North Carolina until the ACC championship game.
Oh, I agree
Right?
with you. As long as they stay within a touchdown and look capable, then they can leave Charlotte and say, hey, we lost 35-31. And the playoff committee they're just going to basically flip-flop Georgia and Clemson. Georgia would probably jump Ohio State and Clemson would drop. And even if they drop them to 6 or 7, that's going to be short-lived. They'll win and jump back up into that top 4 as long as they as long as the game is competitive and they're showing that, hey, we were within a touchdown of one of the top 4 teams in the country.
See, I think, by the way, I to his chaos point and him saying, even as an Ohio State fan, I would like to see a little bit of chaos. Now, obviously, I want the chaos to favor Ohio State, of course. But I have a feeling this could be a year where you could see some things happen. I think that, like, if you look at 18, I thought Alabama and Clemson were kind of on a collision course that year, and it turned out to be the case. You look at 19, you had 3 teams that were obviously clearly better than everybody else. And then last year, I think Alabama separated themselves over the course of the season. I think this could be a year that could be a little bit more like 2017. Even though Alabama won it that year, I think that was a year where there was some competitive balance out there to where I think that the gap between the teams might not be as great as it's been within the last 3 years. What do you think, Mark?
Well, yeah, 2017, we had Alabama barely make the playoffs. They had to be chosen. They all have to be chosen, but of course, as a non-conference champion. And then you had 2 extremely competitive playoff/championship games between Georgia, Oklahoma, and Georgia, Alabama.
Right.
I still have to think that, I do like Georgia. All these injuries are hurting my case. I don't like what I'm hearing out of Georgia camp. I don't like anything that's pretty much happened with Georgia besides getting the West Virginia cornerback and the Clemson cornerback as well. Darian Kendrick and Tyke Smith have been the 2 big additions, but we thought that they had Eric Gilbert as of a few days ago, but they do not. I think that Alabama should come back to the PAC somewhat. They should, because they had 3 all-time great players, and Mac Jones, I know a lot of people would balk at that, but statistically a great, great player, leave the program. But the guys that are filling in, it wouldn't shock me that they would just fall in line with what's happened the last 14 years. So
Right, and I'm not. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, because that's the age-old question, is whether the Alabama losses really mean something or they don't mean anything. They typically have meant, I don't want to say nothing, but they haven't meant much.
Well, let me throw the team. I mean, I think there's a few teams that can be the fly in the ointment, Mark. And the team, and I know we've been talking about who can be the non-Power 5 team that can do it. And I just think Cincinnati's schedule lines up this year to where, especially now, if Indiana's as good as people think they are, and at the very least Notre Dame's a top 10 team, and they were to get wins over a top 15 team, let's say in Indiana, and a top 10 Notre Dame team, and beat maybe a top 15, top 20 team in their own conference, and run the table with that kind of schedule, I'm not saying you could make. I think you could make a case you could take them over a 1-loss Power 5 champion. Don't you? I mean, beating that kind of schedule, a top 10 team to top 15 team, and they go undefeated?
Well, the committee's going to have to make a very difficult and very controversial decision if it does that. And the team that I'm looking at would be Clemson, first and foremost, because they have the weakest conference. So if you're talking about a one-loss conference champion and that one loss is to Georgia and it's Clemson, then the rest of their wins, they are not going to play unless things dramatically change and North Carolina State or Boston College become a 10-win team. They're not going to play a top 25 team until the conference championship game. That's a bad schedule versus Cincinnati playing two teams ranked somewhere in the 10 to 20 range. And like you say, the American Conference being what it's been for the last 6 or 7 years is going to produce another team, if not two, that are going to be 10-2 type top 25 teams, whether that be Memphis, Tulsa, fill in the blank.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think that it always designed the best way for the non-Power 5 to get in is for them to have a schedule like Cincinnati's got this year, where you could have a very good Notre Dame, very good Indiana team in your non-conference, and then you're able to beat it, beat another good team in your conference. And then, 12-1 Clemson beating your best win is over number 15 North Carolina, and they're the one other good team they played, they lost to.
Yeah. So if the committee follows through in your scenario with what they are called to do, and that's simply blind resume these teams and somehow watch them, which is impossible. They say that they do this, watch them and give the eyeball test without considering those are Cincinnati uniforms versus those are Clemson uniforms. But if they are fully capable of doing that, you cannot sell me on a Clemson resume, even with a close loss to Georgia, being better with that schedule with an ACC championship game against, let's say, a 10-2 North Carolina team, being better than Cincinnati running the table in an American Conference that minus Clemson is almost ACC caliber, with the Indiana game on the road and the Notre Dame games on the road, if they fulfill their expectations, not unreasonable expectations, but Indiana's 8-4, 9-3, and Notre Dame's 10-2, that Cincinnati does not have a better resume in this scenario. I just don't think. I think that the odds are stacked against Cincinnati getting through that entire schedule unscathed.
Right. I know they've got a lot of starters back, including their quarterback. I'm not saying that they will either, Mark, but it's just a situation scenario. Listen, bottom line, Ohio State's going undefeated anyway, so it doesn't matter. They're going to get one of the slots. So let's have chaos with the other three teams, and I'd love to see it.
All right, David. Sounds good. Appreciate the call.
All right, Mark. You take care of yourself.
You too. We'll see
you.
Have
a good one. Bye-bye.
All right. More calls coming in here at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark. It's McD Sports Board. How are you doing?
McD. What's going on tonight?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm good.
Okay, so I just wanted to talk about this Alliance thing real quick. As a team, as a fan and a team, let me reword that. As a fan of a team in the Big Ten, I like it on the standpoint of this. I want to schedule more opponents in the ACC, obviously, because Maryland used to be an ACC. I like to face Virginia, North Carolina, Clemson, even some of the other teams, even a Pitt. If West Virginia joins the ACC, them. So I like it for the standpoint if it's scheduling, at least with the ACC part. So I hope it happens where we can maybe have more scheduling with the ACC,
because I mean we do have some series down the road against I think Virginia. I believe we have a series against North Carolina at some point down the road, but it kind of sucks. I mean, like there's really no rivals in the Big Ten for us and for Maryland.
Well, if this does come about the way we've talked about it, the scheduling alliance between the three conferences, I do think that based on geography and based on old rivalries and attachments from previous decades, that it would only make sense to, not that they'll never have Maryland go play Washington or something like that every so often, but that these non-conference schedules are going to be built in such a way that they make sense and they recuperate some of these rivalries from the past. And Maryland's the perfect example of that, of course, being a former member of the ACC, and have Maryland play all the teams that you're talking about on a fairly regular basis, to where their non-conference schedule in a given year might look like FCS, North Carolina, Virginia. And those are their three non-conference games.
And I hope that's the case because I would like to face those teams. NC State as well. I forgot to mention them in the process as well. That used to be a end of year game for us. Every our last game every year was NC State. But I'm sure the Big 12. But,
that's how I would formulate it. And let's say make it every 4 out of 5 years that they're playing two former ACC teams and whatever their group of 5 or FCS matchup. And then the fifth year they play a former ACC, but then they go out and play USC or Washington or Stanford or whomever, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping if it's a alliance between the three conferences, Maryland will play more ACC teams than Pac-12 teams. Like I don't think there should ever be a year that 2 of the games are against Pac-12 schools. I mean, the last Pac-12 school Maryland played with Stanford in the bowl game that we lost in 2000. I don't know, 15. It feels like forever ago, but I mean, I like it for scheduling purposes. Now, I do disagree with you that the SEC isn't going to be scheduling games with the other three conferences because of South Carolina, Clemson, Georgia Tech. I still think those are going to be in play.
Okay, so I didn't get to that point before I started to go into all this other stuff. So that's a valid point that there could be some consideration given to those 4 rivalries to maintain those. But I think we tend to consider some of these rivalries to be so sacred to think that they're never going to get broken up. Well, money and alliances that counter other moves made by other conferences to maintain power and authority and to protect turf override that. So we've seen it year after year after year. We've seen Nebraska and Oklahoma torn apart. We've seen Texas and Texas A&M torn apart, and West Virginia and Maryland torn apart, and West Virginia and Pitt torn apart, and now Oklahoma and Oklahoma State torn apart. So there are no rivalries that are off the table of being torn apart. So don't be surprised if they are, but I will also not be surprised if there is some kind of alliance formed that we've talked about, but also that it would give space to maintaining Kentucky, Louisville, Georgia Tech, Florida State, and Clemson, South Carolina. So maybe that, but those are not so renowned that they could not be torn to shreds.
Yeah, I just can't see them getting rid of that Florida State rivalry out of all of them. I just can't see that.
Again, there have been rivalries that have been just as sacred that have been thrown to the wayside for business purposes.
I hope you're wrong. I mean,
well, I'm not going to be right or wrong because I'm not telling you that it's going to happen. I'm just telling you that don't be surprised if it does. And also, we need to consider, while it's easy for us to take one team out of these 40 and say Maryland should be playing North Carolina State, and all these ACC teams because it makes sense based on history and geographically, that we can't just schedule in a vacuum. Yeah, I also think that they should be sending Minnesota, Nebraska, and Iowa out to the Pac-12 more often than they would have them playing ACC teams, and it should work generally in that fashion. But that's easier to say than to sit down with a full schedule involving 40 schools and figuring out what their non-conference schedules should look like.
I agree. And one other point, Mark, not related to what I was bringing up, a point you made earlier. If you need someone to keep track of the college game day, what they pick every Saturday, I could do that for you.
Well, I don't need anyone to do it. I'm just saying that I post my prediction record, and it can be easily checked by going through the videos. They make these predictions every week, and I haven't watched College Game Day for more than 5 minutes for probably 15 years. And that's not me dissing College Game Day. I think it's a remarkable show. I just plan my day to just watch football. But anyway, if you want to keep track of their records, don't do it for me. I don't want you to put yourself out, but I appreciate you stepping up here. But it would be interesting to know their records. They should be posting their records. They're doing predictions. They should post their records.
I mean, I watched every minute of this and second of that. They post their underdog. They pick an underdog before they do their picks, and they post that. But
let's also consider this.
The weekday.
Also consider this, McD, that if you keep track of their prediction records, those prediction records are going to come as straight up money line predictions. And what do most people want to know? They want to know the prediction against the spread. And they just tell you who's going to win the game.
That is true. I mean, I was going to keep track of it just for my records, just for me.
Well, keep us
picking
updated.
Their pick. Yeah, I will. That's all I have, Mark.
All right, McD. Appreciate the call.
Thanks for taking my call. Go Terps.
All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hi, John.
Hey, John. What's going on tonight?
Not too much. Thank you for all you do. I live up in Portland, Oregon, and so I love all the content you've been putting on through Ryan Winter and Mike Black.
Well, thank you for that, sir. I appreciate it. Those kind of comments keep me going.
Of course. And I wanted to talk about an earlier caller who said it's pretty much in the bag for Ohio State to beat Oregon and go undefeated, I think he said. And I just think that Oregon's not getting as much love. I think Ohio State's favored by 10 and a half points or something. And I think what Cristobal's built is something special. You've got a ton of 5-star talent that is really coming into a formidable age, and they're all just getting jacked. And I think it's going to be a close game.
Well, I completely agree with you. Of course, we haven't gotten to week 2, so I've not predicted the game. But even in talking to Oregon people, I've got 2 Oregon guys that I have on here on a regular basis, and they just think it's a foregone conclusion that Ohio State's going to win that game. And I don't. I would not be surprised at all if Oregon beat Ohio State. Now, do I think Ohio State's better? Yeah. Are they at home? Of course. Do I think they're that much better? Well, I think Ohio State's one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the country, and Oregon's more like one of the 10 or 12 best. But this is us sitting here in August trying to project what's going to happen during a football season. We largely have to throw away what Oregon did last year because of the circumstances. And like you, I think that they are extremely good. If Anthony Brown does win the job, I know what he brings to the table. It's nothing spectacular, but he's a veteran quarterback with a lot of experience.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about Anthony Brown. I mean, I don't know if you listened to an interview with Micah Pittman recently, but he said his arm compares in terms of power to Herbert. And I think, too, when you look at that quarterback battle that we're going to have, Ryan Day still hasn't picked, his guy. I mean, granted, Cristobal hasn't either, but it looks like Anthony Brown's job for sure. And I just wonder, with the experience, contrasting those two players, I think we have an advantage in the quarterback play. And also being week 2, we each get a tune-up game. I think they're playing Minnesota. We play Fresno State. But I think we have the better quarterback play. I mean, CJ Stroud is probably going to win the job, they're saying, but I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I will rephrase that myself. For me, Oregon has the more known quarterback play. I don't know if they have the better quarterback play. They have the better known quarterback play. We know who Anthony Brown is. He's played, 3 or 4 games last year, but he played a full season at Boston College. I think he played 2 practically full seasons at Boston College. And, he put up like 20 touchdowns and 9 picks one season. So that's not phenomenal, but it's good. It's capable. And it was with lesser talent, pretty substantially lesser talent in the skill position and on the offensive. Well, the offensive line of Boston College has been actually really good. The skill position players, they've upgraded at BC, and they're going to have their best skill position players on the outside at BC than they've had in years and years and years. So the guys that he played with, not in the same category as the talent he has surrounding him now at Oregon. So maybe he can produce much better than that. But we know who he is. We don't know who CJ Stroud is. The advantage they have at Ohio State is if CJ Stroud is not the guy and he shows that against Minnesota, then they can move on to one of the other 2 guys.
Yeah, I guess I don't know if one game's enough to make them change if they don't get what they want or out of quarterback play. But I think Anthony Brown, too, with the consistency with Joe Moorhead now in year 2, I mean, look what Joe Moorhead did with Trace McSorley and some of those guys. I think it's kind of the stars are starting to align for Oregon, and they're not getting. I mean, we didn't play Iowa State well at all, granted, but I think we're kind of in that next year that we've got a chance to really, I think, run the table.
Yeah, and as you well know, Ohio State had significant issues in the secondary last year. And do I think they're going to be better this year? Well, they can't help but be better. They will be better. But I don't know that they're going to go from a horrible pass defense to a great pass defense. I think they'll remedy much of the issues, but they're breaking in a new linebacker core and some new players in the secondary. They will have a just ridiculously loaded defensive front that's phenomenal and in talent is the best in the country. But probably the 2 most highly touted players are going to be playing their first college games the week before. So I don't know that they're going to be a wrecking crew right out of the gate. So I think Oregon's going to play a very competitive game in Columbus. And I'm going to I'm not going to sit here right now and say Ohio State's going to win that game for sure. I'm going to be much more confident to make a prediction on that game after I watch Ohio State play Minnesota, and also the Oregon effort against Fresno State to a lesser degree, but still, I want to see both teams play.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, as you said, Ohio State's defensive line is going to be pretty nasty. But you're going up against, Coach Cristobal and Mirabal, two great offensive line minds. I mean, maybe the best in college football.
Mm-hmm.
So they may have a little counter to what they're planning, as well as, these guys go against the best, arguably the best defensive ends in college football, and came on Thibodeau every practice. So, there's that to factor in too.
You've lost two defensive backs recently as well that are good players.
Yes.
Against.
Yes, they were starters and they were suspended indefinitely. So, best case scenario, I'm hoping that they miss the Fresno State game and they're able to play for the Ohio State game. But the good thing is we have a lot of depth there with Dante Manning with a 5-star cornerback, and then blanking on his name. Oh, Bridges is really coming into form. He's 6'3" too, so maybe he could lock up one of the. I will need all hands on deck for the Ohio State wide receivers, but I think we're capable back there.
Yeah, and the more I think about this quarterback situation for Ohio State is that if their quarterback CJ Stroud, he should be the starter. If he does not play well against Minnesota, so if he plays horribly, if he throws 4 picks and goes 10 for 29, he's lost the job. But and if he doesn't lose the job, then that's telling us a lot about what Ryan Day is seeing in practice, that they're really in trouble. I don't anticipate that. But if he has a marginal game, if he goes 15 for 28, throws a couple picks, and it's really not what they want, then they're going to have a difficult decision, because they're going to think, okay, we need better productivity than that. But do we stick with him because he does have a game experience, versus trotting out another young player, a redshirt freshman, who has no playing experience against a good team like Oregon?
Well, I mean, that would be the best case scenario for us, right?
Yeah.
CJ Stroud comes out limp, and then Brown has a solid game against Fresno State, and now you're talking, okay, now this game's taken on a little more maybe interest from the lines start to move a little bit in Vegas even.
Absolutely. All right, sir. Appreciate the call.
All right. Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
All right. So we've got plenty of calls here. I appreciate everybody that's calling in to talk college football. We are going to be here for like the next 5 months constantly. So we're pretty much here like constantly throughout the entire year, calendar year, even when college football is like least on most people's minds in sports. We're still here talking college football like all the time. We treat May like it's October. So we will be here. I am just looking to get to my next meal. But let's take these 2 calls here at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's DeAndre, man. I'll make it quick.
Oh, that's okay. I don't want you to make it. I don't want you to make it quick. I'm here for you. So, what do you need?
The first question is going to be about Kansas State. So, with all the realignment, and let's just assume the Big 12 is going to break up, because we don't know if it's going to break up or not. Where will Kansas State go? I already know Kansas and Iowa State, because of that academics that Kansas shown with basketball, probably going to end up in the Big 10. So where will Kansas State go? Because they seem like they're going to be really the odd man out.
Okay. I made a little speech a few minutes ago to basically say there are certain things that I come on here and say, I know what I'm talking about. Please listen to me. I really know what I'm talking about. It involves TV and I worked in it for 30 years, or I know college football history, or I know the NFL, or whatever it is. And I'll just flat out say, I know what I'm talking about. There's other things that I'll say, you know what? I'm speculating like everybody else. I'm throwing up my hands saying, who knows what's going to happen here? I've got a lot of theories. I've got a lot of thoughts, and this is one of those, throwing up my hands. I don't think that the Big Ten is going to add schools just to add schools. I don't think that they're going to add any of those Big 12 teams. I think that they would have already done it. And I think that with this alliance coming into play now, that does not bode well for those former Big 12 teams. I don't think any of them really offer much to anyone. I think that we think a little bit too much about the football on the field. And if that's the case, TCU and Oklahoma State are obviously the best football playing schools in Iowa State right now. But historically, TCU and Oklahoma State are the two best football playing schools. So they give something to offer. But I don't think that really any of them move the needle for. Now, they might be more attractive for the Pac-12 because the Pac-12 is not in the financial position as the Big Ten. But if the Big Ten, if you're, put it this way, the Big Ten right now distributes as much money as the SEC, and actually in the last 2 years, a little bit more per team. So if they add 2 schools, then they have to distribute the money between 16 instead of 14. So those 2 better bring. Like if you're bringing in Oklahoma and Texas, that raises the value of the league so much that you can now give out more money to everybody, even though you've added 2 teams. Where if you're adding Iowa State and Kansas in football, that doesn't add anything to the Big Ten's value. So they're actually going to be lessening their dollar amount per school. It just doesn't. I don't see where they really get any bang for the buck. The only one of those schools that play in a TV ratings mega market is TCU in Dallas, but I don't think that they really care enough about TCU for that even to move the needle. So I don't think the Big Ten is going to expand.
Okay. All right. Well, that answers my question, but I know you can't answer the question because you're not in those rooms with those people, but it was just a curiosity question. I really think that they're going to go to. I think Kansas, Iowa State is going to go. Kansas because of basketball. I mean, I know it might not move the needle in football, definitely not, but basketball wise, yeah, it probably would. But
and a lot of people,
Kansas, not Indiana area.
And a lot of people think that, and if that comes about, then certainly college basketball is more important than I thought it was. But and it is. It makes money, and we just read it tonight that in these reports about this alliance between the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Pac-12, they are considering men's and women's basketball to be part of that as well. I would think that the Pac-12 should go grab some of those schools. Now, that's the league that's vulnerable, that gets picked on and ignored and disregarded, is the Pac-12. So even though it doesn't help them a ton, I'm just thinking of the football. I would go move toward the middle of the country even more past Colorado and grab like TCU and Oklahoma State and be some kind of a mega conference and grab some of that territory where they care more about football in Oklahoma and Texas. And if I were the Pac-12, I would go gunning for those schools.
Next question is, I heard you talk about Clemson and Georgia. And from your last video, the prediction of Clemson, I know you were joking when you said Utah might be the team to beat Clemson, go 11-1. I know Vegas picked Clemson to be a negative a 3.5 favorite over Georgia. So let me ask you this: when everybody thought, what do you believe? Now that I know you don't know, but what do you believe the reason why Georgia wasn't the favorite coming in versus Clemson, according to Vegas? And I know they want people to put money on both sides of the ball, so maybe Georgia was getting more money. So I was wondering, what did you think the reason why they made it? I think it started off as a 4-point favorite for Clemson. So what was the reason do you think Vegas had made Clemson a favorite over Georgia?
I think that Vegas has typically more of a broad stroke approach to laying the odds and the point spreads, meaning that they look more at history, recent history, but more history, less than they do breaking down offensive line versus defensive line play. And I think that they trust Clemson's coaching staff. I think they trust Dabo. I think they trust Venables. I think they trust that they've played well despite what we've seen the last 2 years. And I'll still say and underline the LSU game was 28-25 with about 9 minutes left. So it wasn't a blowout from the start. Those two teams for 50 minutes were neck and neck. So I think that they trust Clemson and their coaching staff, and more so than Georgia.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering why. But I will say this though. I know you already went over Gilbert's issues, but I didn't hear you mention this. But Smith, the DB that came from West Virginia, he sounds like he's going to be out. The other tight end sounds like he's going to be out. So I know, and I heard you and Jason talk about it. I done said it on my show. The real problem with Clemson this year, outside of depth at DB, is the fact that Clemson interior line is going to have trouble with Georgia's interior defensive line. But nobody's talked about the fact that Clemson rotates 9 people at defensive line. And from what I understand from listening to other Georgia people talk, Georgia has an issue at left tackle. And Clemson, outside of Breezy and Davis, their next 4 best players were Murray, Henry, who everybody forgets was a top 10 recruit coming out, and he played well last year. Xavier Thomas, Mascal is been there forever and a day. And Boston, so that left tackle might have a lot of issues with versus Clemson. So I look at all of that, and they're equal. I don't know why it's not a pick'em game. They're both very equal because I got questions about Daniels just like you got questions about DJ. Because I would ask this: Stovis was a 3-star, maybe in a walk-on, and he got beat out by him and ran out to the East Coast to Georgia, and then I know he might have been hurt, but he had to be better than the 2 quarterbacks that Georgia had put in there in the beginning of the season, especially for the Alabama game. So I wonder, how good is JT Daniels? So I think only played, I know against Cincinnati and Mississippi State, and I might be missing a game. I know he only played in 3 games last year. And I watched a couple of those games, but yeah, he threw for 392 yards against Cincinnati. And people always say Cincinnati has a good front. But when I think about Clemson's front, they're full of 5- and 4-star players. And Cincinnati's not. And Brent Venables has been proven to be probably one of the best defensive players. Joe Burrow was unreal. I mean, and that team that they lost to at LSU, like you just said, last year, they got smacked in the mouth. I don't know why more people didn't do what Ohio State and Notre Dame did at Clemson. It's like while they're looking over the ball, just smack the ball and go. Because that's what it happened. That's what Ohio State and Notre Dame did to them. And Carolina did it in a different type of way too. That year they almost lost to Carolina. So I just, hopefully that's one thing that Brent Venables has cleaned up. Hey man, we got to know the calls instead of just waiting. And then also, like I said too, Justin Foster or Xavier Thomas wasn't healthy last year against Ohio State. And Ohio State won the game, and I can make all the jokes I want to. They had 12 years to prepare for the game. They, they studied Clemson all year. I can say all of that stuff. That doesn't matter. Ohio State won a game, but I would make the argument that Clemson didn't play with a full arsenal like what Georgia's going to get. Clemson's only lost to one person, and that was Kendrick. And, Dabo got rid of him for some reason. If it's maturity or whatever, but I just don't see it like other people see it. I think it's going to be a very good game, and I hope it lives up to the hype compared to other times that we've seen. Some of the games don't live up to the hype.
Well, I do have to say that regardless of what I've thought of this game and the way I've sized it up the entire offseason, obviously the recent injuries and personnel moves, Eric Gilbert obviously not ready to play and not with the team. Those kind of things they're all moving against me. That's for sure. So I may reassess, but and I will reassess to some degree before this game kicks off.
Yeah, because to me, and we have talked about this before, I always thought that Gilbert was the ace factor, not so much Kendrick. Because my question was, they got a 6'7" tight end, then they got a 6'8" tight end going against Clemson DBs and linebackers. So linebackers are not very athletic. So I thought that would be a big advantage. You thought about this before. I thought that was an area that Clemson would struggle with because they're small and Gilbert's height and ability. And Georgia has very talented running backs, talented receivers, and they go on for days. They've been the top 2 recruiting classes along with Alabama the last 3 or 4 years, 5 years maybe. So I know how good Georgia is, but I thought that would be a big difference in the game. We still don't know when he's coming back. He might show up the day before the game. They're like, yeah, go ahead and start. We don't know what's going on with the young man. Hopefully he's all right because it's there's some things bigger than football. But so I hope he gets his life together. But that's what I was looking at, and that's what I wanted to ask you about. What did you think about why did Vegas put it at 3.5 compared to what we all look at every day and see? But next question, and I'm going to be honest with you. I know it's going to sound crazy, but I thought that either Oklahoma or Georgia should have been AP number 1. And the reason why I say that, because I know Alabama's a machine. Clemson has 10 starters coming back on defense. And, they got Justin Ross. And everybody's happy to have Justin back. I am too. But he hasn't been hit in a real game in a year. And then you got a new running back, new quarterback with Clemson. Ohio State replacing Justin Fields, and a really good running back. I know Teague is highly recruited, but they got 5 good receivers. But I thought Oklahoma should have been number 1. What do you think the AP voters will go along with? Is it because Alabama is such a machine that they thought that Alabama should start? And we all know these polls really don't mean nothing. It's just something for us to talk about.
Yeah, they mean nothing.
Right.
Except for we all have a pretty good idea of who's good. So we could take a poll like the coaches poll has 65 votes and the AP something in the same range, 65 or 70 votes. We could take 70 of us that are online right now, give everybody a ballot, and the poll's going to come out nearly the same as what they've got. So we all have a sense of who's really, really good. And we have maybe some differences on who's going to emerge out of that as the real championship contenders, whether that be Clemson and Ohio State or Ohio State and Alabama or whoever it is. We all are pretty well settled on who's really, really, really talented and good. And then who the next layer is of Iowa State, North Carolina, Notre Dame, et cetera, and then on from there. But I think that if this was 10 years ago, that even 10 years ago, there was just as much respect to a certain extent for Nick Saban, but that people have routinely seen very productive, great players leave Alabama, and then the next guy fill in and be just as good, if not better. And just, it's been borne out over and over and over and over. So everybody trusts Saban, coaching staff, even though those guys turn over just as much as the players, and they just trust. And this defense is being touted as the best Alabama unit since 2016 and 17.
Wow. Well, I ain't gonna lie, I ain't gonna sit there and like I know Alabama's defensive roster like that, but I mean that's saying a whole lot. And I know which one did Clemson beat, the 16 team.
Yes,
yeah. I think
but that defense went into that game as considered an all-time great defense. Now, of course, Deshaun Watson and Mike Williams and those guys made plays.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I get upset about. And let's just forget about what Deshaun Watson gets going on. I don't think Deshaun Watson was a four-star. I don't beat this drum enough. But I think he was a four-star coming out of Georgia. But what he had to work with, especially on the offensive line, compared to what Trevor Lawrence had to work on the offensive line, a lot of those guys that Trevor had his freshman and sophomore year, those guys were freshmen and sophomores. And, we talk about the interior line. That offensive line had issues. And then Trevor Lawrence had a whole lot more talent than Deshaun Watson did. I mean, Wayne Goldman, I love him as a player. He was a hell of a blocker, hell of a receiver out the backfield, but he was nowhere on the level as ETN. And then I know you had Mike Williams, and both of them had Winfrey. But who else did Deshaun Watson have? I mean, everybody talks how great Lawrence is and what he's going to do in the NFL. But, I mean, I think Deshaun Watson has led the league in passing. Now, what else is going on in his personal life? I don't know the guy. I mean, the stuff I've seen him do as far as, Habitat for Humanity and stuff like that. And for his mom, I thought was great. But, this other stuff is crazy, but I don't think that should count towards football. I mean, like I tell people about OJ, yeah, he was a jerk. But should we really count what he did, at USC and the Buffalo Bills against him? Because, I mean, people make mistakes in their personal life and they're not perfect. And Deshaun Watson needs to get more respect. And I know he does get respect, but I guess Trevor Lawrence, fits the mold, and a lot of people just don't talk about it. Oh, last thing, Mark. They did Pro Football Focus. ESPN did it. And it was going over the top quarterback, because after Tim Tebow got cut, they were talking about the top 15 quarterbacks of all time. And one person strikes me that they're in there, and don't get me wrong, he's a great quarterback. But Peyton Manning was number 2 behind Roger Staubach. And I know Peyton Manning had a good career at Tennessee. But do you think that he deserves to be the second best quarterback by Pro Football Focus?
The second best quarterback in the history of college football? No, Peyton Manning is not
Yep,
the second
pro
greatest
football.
quarterback in the history of college football. Peyton Manning was a better pro than he
I don't wanna
was
say
a
Roger.
college player.
Right. And the college game is so unique about the running quarterback and having multiple quarterbacks. I mean, quarterback can do multiple things. He was a great passer. He had a great offensive line and good running backs and good receivers. But I was wondering what you thought about that, because they said, and this was done by I've been looking for it, if I could send it to you on Twitter, but it was done by Pro Football Focus. And even Roger Staubach, and I hate the Cowboys, but I know how good Roger Staubach was when he played. I don't think he should be in there at number one. I mean, I don't know what they were looking at, but I mean, Tommy Frazier, Deshaun Watson, and oh my gosh, Lamar Jackson. I mean, Lamar Jackson played at Navy when Roger Staubach played at Navy. Boy, could you imagine the stats that he would have? Just by running, like, none of the dudes would have been able to catch him. he would have had a field day on them guys.
Well, anytime you're comparing players from different eras, there are different ways to evaluate it. There are just different ways to evaluate it. You can just basically say flat out, be somebody who evaluates these players to be so much better than back then, just to say, you might as well leave them all out. You might as well say anybody come up with a year, 1980 just doesn't belong. We're not even going to consider them because they're not good enough. You could take that slant, or you can say
where did Staubach come at?
63, 64? He won the Heisman.
So again, we're gonna go back to what we always talk about. I mean, you got to look at it because it's part of our history. You know, who was he playing against, and what type of talent was he playing against, and was it a fair balance? And I know Navy played everybody. I know they played Pitt. I know they played Notre Dame, but you also got to look at how many Southern teams they played, and what minorities on those teams. I mean, I'm not trying to be funny, but I mean, that's the truth.
Well, it is the truth. It is the truth, but you also have to consider that Peyton Manning and especially Roger Staubach, because of the point that you just made, they're given more of a lift in those rankings because of what they did afterwards. So what they did afterward, and I'm not saying it's right, but basically what they did, you're talking about 2 of the 10 greatest quarterbacks in history in the NFL. In the history of the NFL. So basically what that did was substantiate what they did there. And I'm not saying that's right. That's not the way I would judge it. I would judge it, what did you do 4 years in college? And even if Tim Tebow was the worst quarterback in the history of the NFL, I wouldn't even consider that. It's just about what did you do as a college quarterback. Roger Staubach, that's tough to evaluate because he became a great passing quarterback with the Cowboys, and I'm sure he had a great arm and did remarkable things at Navy. But if you go back and look at his stats, they're nothing. But he did lift. Consider the Navy football was awful without him. He basically was kind of a one-man wrecking crew. Like, he lifted them to a Cotton Bowl New Year's Day game when they weren't approaching that at all. But if you look at it statistically, it's just not going to measure up with anything that we see today. I think that you've got to, and again, this is the way I approach it, because I think if you have the thought that players have just gotten better year after year after year, that you're basically going to eliminate all those guys and just say, well, let's look at the last 20 years. But then where do you draw the line? When did they become so much better? Well, it wasn't 1 year. Everybody's just suddenly became great and became so athletic. Obviously, it's been a progression. And that's another thing. Anytime somebody has shot me down, or any argument I've made for an older player being great, I've been able to I've been able to compare it against, like do you, like most most people today would still consider like Lawrence Taylor to be a great all-time player, and even by today's standards, a freak and a great player. Well,
Right.
Roger Staubach played against players that played against Lawrence Taylor, and if Roger Staubach was great against those players, why wouldn't he be great against the players that Lawrence Taylor played against? Their careers only missed by 1 year, 2 years.
Right.
So we can go on and on and
agree
on.
with you.
I think the only way to do it, I'll just say this as my parting shot. The only way to fairly do it is to compare the dominance of that player against his era and against the players that he played against.
Right. But and I agree with you, but like I said, when you get past 1970, because of the unbalance, because of the unbalance in our society.
Absolutely.
At that time, 1968, yeah.
I've told you many times, DeAndre, when you bring that up, that is completely valid. It makes complete sense. We're watching a game today where, what is it? In the NFL, it's higher. In college football, I don't know what it is among the major schools. I bet it's more like, I don't know what the percentages are.
I think it was 53 last time I sent it to you.
It was what?
63%. 63% last time I sent it to you on Twitter.
Yeah, that seems
I sent it to you in the email.
Yeah. And who knows what it is amongst the better players. So anyway, so obviously if these guys were not playing against but see they proved in Roger Staubach's case, he then proved in a desegregated NFL that he was just as good.
Right. And Dallas, again, let's look at Dallas, for example. Most of Dallas players, when Dallas got good, and the Steelers and the Chiefs too, most of their players came from historically black colleges.
Exactly. They rated historically black colleges with guys like Everson Walls and Too Tall Jones and Dwight White and Joe Green and on, Mel Blount. Absolutely. John Stallworth.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like most of the players he played against came out of the HBCU. But Mark, I'll give the last person a chance. You get you something to eat, man.
Thanks a lot, DeAndre. I appreciate it. Have a good night.
All right.
Yeah, I could whine about my eating today. I scrambled some eggs about noon, and that's been it. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. How you doing? Who do we have on the line?
This is Jeremiah.
Hey, Jeremiah. What's up?
So I was curious what you were thinking of have you heard of the latest rumors in UT with the quarterback competition?
Well, we had a tremendous live stream 2 nights ago. I believe it was with our guys from Texas Talk, and they seem to believe that Hudson Card is going to be the starting quarterback.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And I was wondering if you think that, Hudson Card, if you look back at his recruiting projections, he was the second quarterback behind Bryce Young, the Alabama quarterback this season. So I was wondering what you think. Do you think that Hudson Card can compete at at the level you think Alabama is expecting out of Bryce Young, or?
Well, that's a great
what
question.
Are you thinking about that?
That is a great question. So let's size this up. On one hand, you've got Steve Sarkisian, who has proven that he can scheme a defense. He can create matchups, and sure, he doesn't necessarily have the Alabama playmakers, but Texas certainly is recruited well, and we can run down their receiver room, and I think it's got a ton of potential. So I think the offensive line at Texas has been substandard for quite some time, so he's going to need that. Now, Bryce Young did get some valuable mop-up time against some good opponents last year, Missouri in particular, of which Hudson Card has not seen anybody. And unfortunately for him, he's going to face a pretty good team and a very experienced team his first time out. He's not going to get that warm up against Texas El Paso or somebody like that. But I think that Steve Sarkisian can definitely put an offense together that is going to utilize Hudson Card to his best abilities. He is a smart offensive mind that is going to put him in a position to excel as a quarterback. The other part of that is developing him in regards to his decision-making within the offense and his mechanics. I don't know where he stands there. I've never seen him play. I didn't see the spring game. So I've never seen Hudson Card play. But I have full confidence in Steve Sarkisian that he can develop him. What he did well at USC and Washington and obviously at Alabama is twofold. Develop quarterbacks to be better players from a technique standpoint, and then also to be more efficient within the offense and to scheme an offense that is going to take advantage of their abilities.
Yeah. Also, second question here. Because kind of the ACC, Pac-12, Big 12, no, Big 10, Pac-12, Big 12 alliance. I was, and then you were saying about how they would play. They were trying to avoid playing SEC teams. Would they wipe out all of the scheduled current games that are currently scheduled for the next 2 years, or would they just stop playing those out of conference games, or what?
That was me.
Like some of these are planned out for the next decade.
That was my conjecture. So my thought process there is that if you are going to form an alliance and you're not going to realign, the Big Ten's not going to get bigger or merge with the Pac-12 or a lot of the crazy ideas that have been thrown out there since all this realignment started, like the Big Ten's going to scarf up USC and UCLA or things like that. They're going to maintain their conference distinction. That if they're going to form a scheduling alliance, the only benefit, and there are people out there that are much smarter than me that maybe can come up with other ways or other benefits, but the benefit that I see is to put together schedules from a national standpoint that are going to create a lot of money and a lot of interest and a lot of TV ratings. Ohio State and USC, Washington and Michigan. We can go on forever. Those type of games, and basically fill up your non-conference schedule with one FCS or one group of 5, and then 2 within your alliance, and basically shut out the SEC and say, if you want to play non-conference games, you're going to play them against a group of 5 in the FCS. That's me. That's my conjecture. That's not built on any type of knowledge of what's going on within those conversations.
Yeah, I have a kind of a different idea of what they could do.
Okay.
So if you think about it, like some of the Pac-12's biggest problems with getting to the college football playoff is they may not have a tough enough of a schedule to where if they lose a game, they're basically knocked out for sure, right? If they can throw in some of the ranked teams that could be in the Big Ten or the Pac-12 or the Big 12, like they play a TCU and they play like a high-ranked Indiana team or something, depending on what the preseason projections are. They basically adjust the schedules every year. And they try and increase the difficulty of the schedule so that teams, if they do lose a game, they slip up, they still have a shot at, just because their strength of their schedule is a little bit stronger. They might get a little bit of a, I don't know how to say it, a cushion to get into the college football playoffs, perhaps, especially if they expand it to 12 teams. They may have more space to squeeze into those 12 slots.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but basically the Pac-12 is going to have a spot in the playoff, number one. And the most likely, if you look at history, if you look at the 7 years that there's been a 14 playoff and you plug in the 12-team playoff, the Pac-12, I ran all those numbers and posted a video, would have 2 to 3 teams in the playoff all those seasons anyway. Take out last season because they only played 4 or 5 games.
Yeah.
So they would be pretty well represented in the playoffs anyway.
I mean, I suppose, but I don't know exactly how that would cut off the SEC, because the SEC is going to have a strong schedule based on all the schools being viewed as a pretty powerhouse schools like Alabama and Georgia and Oklahoma and sometimes Texas and some other schools like Florida. I don't know if that really helps them much. I mean, if you were going to have them just cut that out, well, I mean, the SEC is more or less going to have about six slots in that 12, 5 or 6 slots into that 12-team playoff. And I don't know. I would think that maybe they would want to try and increase the strength of their schedule. I don't know if completely ignoring the SEC is really going to help them that much.
Why would
you don't lose out on some of the bigger brands?
Basically, ignoring the SEC would strengthen their schedule, and it would lessen the SEC schedule. Not that the SEC schedules wouldn't still be pretty well stacked just within the conference, but they would have no meaningful non-conference games to play. None. If the other 3 conferences wanted to do that, they could completely take the SEC off the grid in non-conference play. Completely shut them out.
But I guess I get what you're saying now, but I don't know. I don't know if it's set in stone. Maybe things play out differently. I don't know if they take that risk of eliminating the possibility of maybe playing a game here or there every other season with one of those big brands. I don't know. I think there's a couple ways they could try and make this alliance work, but I don't know. I was just seeing what you were thinking and what you thought of my idea. But yeah.
Well, I appreciate the call.
I'll keep watching. All right.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Have a good night. Yeah, just to remind everyone, we've got so much going on here, and once this season kicks off, we're going to have live post-game shows for Ohio State, Michigan, Nebraska, Iowa, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, Florida, possibly Georgia, Florida State, Miami, and I don't think I missed anyone. All those teams are going to have post-game shows after every game on their team channels. Some of them are going to be simulcasted here or on our SEC channel or on a newly formed Big Ten channel. Also, 24 straight hours right here. May not be me sitting here in front of you for 24 consecutive hours. It won't. You don't want to see that. It's not going to be a pretty sight. It's not going to be a pretty sight for like 19 or 20 hours. And voiceofcollegefootball.com. voiceofcollegefootball.com. Please check out the store. Go to the top of the screen, check out the store, voiceofcollegefootball.com. You guys are amazing. We will see you all very soon. Hit that bell for the notifications to know when we're dropping new content. I may do a marathon day of just running through all my predictions because I'm way behind on the prediction videos, and they may just be thrown out there like every 15 minutes. So appreciate it, everyone. We will see you next time right here at the Voice of College Football.